I appreciate the opportunity to be here, everyone. Good afternoon. So I am the lone psychiatrist, or maybe I'm not the lone psychiatrist, but the one that gets called. So I came so far, really, to be here. It's just down the block, over the bridge, but I made it. So I wanted to give some comments. This is going to be totally different from what you guys are all doing. I appreciate everything you do. Dr. Castry, I was listening to all of your stuff. I got to tell you, it's so awesome to see stuff that goes exactly with my clinical experience. So the fact is medicines and psychotherapy go together and are better than either one individually in almost every illness. So it's great to see that. The other thing, of course, is the fact that adverse events can make things worse. Makes me think of a few things. One, when you first start antidepressants, that a lot of patients will have worsening depression initially, and they're at highest risk for suicide in that first period of time. But it also gives me kind of the permission to write a prescription to get rid of a patient's family. See, that's what I was thinking that could do. Anyway, my jokes are just not working today. Okay. And the whole critical period, just as we think about it too, chronic patients, we see lots of chronic depression, psychosis, anxiety, and that chronicity is just so difficult to break. So that critical period, early intervention, prodromal period, whatever you want to use it for our clinical thing, that's really where we're focusing, and it's very difficult to see patients and get to them that early. So people who know me, I advocate for antidepressants in the water. I think it would be beneficial. There's probably some in there, but not enough. And so I think that might be beneficial. So thank you very much for integrating. And I am going to talk a little bit about totally different from you guys. And what am I using, my little thing? Right here, got it? Okay. Different from what you guys have been talking about, but of course psychiatry is perfect for this precision neuroscience that we're talking about right here, because every patient is different. So I am never bored. It's great. So individual therapy, individual phenotypes, as Dr. Montague was talking about yesterday, very different. And in medicine now, with training my residents, and I'm trying to populate the world with psychiatrists as quickly as possible, because I know we all need them. But the big focus right now, quality, safety, and the more that we do that and get monitored for such, the more objective data that we're going to have. And I think that's only a benefit for our field. So I wanted to focus a little bit. You guys are talking about all of these cool things. I just know the last part. So I'm going to go with the clinical testing and talk a little bit about what I have been doing and what I think some of the challenges and things that are coming up. So the Institute of Medicine recently put out a report, and they called for the disruptive innovation of the need to decrease the separation between healthcare delivery and research. There's a big disconnect between those two things, and that needs to be the focus. So I've been in clinical trials this is my 20th year, and they have definitely changed, coming from different aspects. So I wanted to show you a little bit. You guys all know this, I am sure, but we deal with phases of getting drugs through the process for FDA approval, at least in this country, and everything from phase 1 to 4. So phase 1 is typically in normal volunteers, typically a small number of people, and you're really testing your compound in humans for the first time, basically looking for safety, not yet efficacy, but safety in normal volunteers. Now that is something that I think Virginia is ripe for, a good phase 1 unit and focus, because those are very specialized clinics and the need for that, I think, is very big. Phase 2 is often separated into 2A and 2B, but first in humans. And you're looking at the compound now in people who have the illness that you want to study, but you have a fairly small number. You're looking for whether the compound is effective in that specific disease state, and you want to know how well does the drug work. During that time, you're also looking for things such as mechanism of action more, looking for dosing ranges, things like that. Phase 3 is what we typically think of as the big double-blind, placebo-controlled, randomized trials. And, oh, I threw this off. Sorry. Okay. And you often have lots of different patients in this one. And at the end, I wanted to bring a couple of comments about recruitment, because that's always the biggest thing. So the drug, you're still looking at safety, but you're also looking at, of course, continued efficacy issues. Once a once a compound gets approved by the FDA, then you're looking at post-marketing surveillance, or phase 4 studies, and really wanting to capture what are the compounds being used, the drugs used in the real world. So most people probably know in medicine, and especially in psychiatry, many of the medications we use are not on label for the illnesses that we treat. So especially in pediatrics, for example, there's few medications for psychiatric illnesses that exist for that. So there is a lot of leeway, and because our patients are so different, that I think it is an individualized art. And once we are able to find out who is going to respond to which medicine, it's going to be awesome, and I know that's coming. So I wanted to talk about the trends that have been written about a little bit, but what future clinical trials, or what kind of issues are going to happen or are going to influence clinical trials. So I've done plenty of them. They can be very different. They can be for varied illnesses. So I've done studies from 3-year-olds, autistic kids, to 85-year-old Alzheimer's patients, and it's varied. I think one of the best things are families with autistic patients and families with Alzheimer's patients. They're so involved. To be a part of a clinical trial where the family and the patient wants to learn a lot about what they have or what they're going through is great. And the majority of people still want to participate in research because they want to make a difference for everybody else. But these are trends that I think are going to influence how we're going to do clinical trials in the first place, or in the future as we're doing that. Many things we've heard a lot in the last couple days about virtual aspects, but trials are going to include a lot more of that. So for example, Pfizer's remote trial did a lot of their screening and their questionnaires via the web. So they did a lot of that. With our smartphones, we were talking about our Fitbits and our health monitoring devices. Those are going to be involved. A study that we've been participating here was SoberLink, looking at monitoring people with alcohol use disorder through a smartphone and getting that. Number 2, and we've talked a lot about this, and of course it's going to affect clinical trials too, is genomics. And of course that's the development of therapies and diagnostic tests that we're going to target special genetic characteristics. And in psychiatry, I think we've been doing this for a long time, taking blood for genetics to be utilized in the future. We haven't gotten as much as, for example, in neurology, and you have very specific genetic abnormalities. Psychiatry doesn't have that. There's also going to be a lot bigger or more emphasis on partnerships with contract research organizations, because as we're going through this, one thing I've noticed, clinical trial protocols are a lot more complicated than they used to be. So they have 25 exclusion criteria, many different phases, many different procedures to do with each one. And these studies, I pay people to come see me, which is a new concept, to see studies, but you're talking 3 to 4 hours at a visit at times. And that I think it takes special people to be part of research and clinical trials. So these trials are much more complex. The next one I wanted to focus on was globalization, and we have that even from our own conference here, but they suggest currently that 1 out of every 3 clinical trials are taking place outside of Western countries. So obviously for things like cost, ability to recruit more patients, but it also increases the heterogeneity of the population we're dealing with, and I think that will provide more generalizability for our compounds or for the approvals and treatments. Next one, translational research. We know that. And we're really focusing on improving the speed at which we have these discoveries that we've heard so many different things and so many promising things here in the last couple of days, but increasing that speed between discovering that and using it in clinical practice, right? So the current average suggesting for a research innovation to clinical practice and actually using it is about 17 years at present. Data analytics, leveraging the amount of clinical info, all that info we're getting, and how we can use it with advanced data modeling. And the last one I wanted to bring up was crowdsourcing, right? People have heard that phrase, but really supporting clinical trials from patient advocacy groups and families of patients with mental illness or other illnesses is really a focus more rather than industry focusing on the clinical trials itself. And this is especially true for rare diseases or orphan drugs that are being looked at. So the little asterisks are the 3 that, in terms of an expert panel, really feel that these are the most important aspects going on. And of course, there are flip side concerns, and I'll end with this, but concerns really in the next few years about, I think, everything that we worry about: privacy and data, security, lack of funding for trials, because they can be very expensive, and the regulation for clinical research is, I would say, intense, perhaps would be a good word. And I just wanted to bring that idea that you get great data, good data, retention, reliability with people who do well at doing these aspects. So I spend a great deal of time doing clinical trials. I spend time teaching trainees. I think it's going to make them better physicians, better doctors, being able to understand and interact with people and look at things from a scientific method. But I think it's important to recognize that people have to be good at what they do, and many in the medical field often will do clinical trials and research studies when they're not very well educated in it, let's put it that way. And I'm very glad that our school is so focused on research and producing physicians that have that focus. So I am going to end here, and I appreciate your time. Thank you. However you want to do it.